Afternoon and welcome to the November 2024 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format. For work sessions like this one where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And I thank you again for joining us, and I thank our guests for joining us for this afternoon's work session. And with that, I formally open this work session and we'll turn it over to the city manager to introduce the first topic.
Thank you, Mayor. Sure appreciate that. Our first topic today is to talk a little bit about the fire fee. I actually think that was what was first anyway. All of a sudden I was like, am I wrong about that? And I'll just say a couple of introductory comments. We don't have a presentation today. We just, this is a usual and an unusual turnaround time for us to go from a public hearing on a Monday night to a work session on Wednesday. And the purpose of that was really if you were going to want to move forward with the ordinance on December 9th as initially scheduled as possible. We wanted to give you some time to make any sort of tweaks to that so that we're not doing that on the fly. That's kind of like the worst case night, situation. We're doing that in the motions in the meeting. So that's really what today was intended for, to understand kind of where you want to go from here. Couple of different paths, I think, moving forward. We do have a scheduled time on December 9th to continue discussion about this, to continue to potentially take action. And as I've been presenting to you and to the community in the last few presentations, we also have the alternate path scenario where if you choose not to move forward or you choose to want to pause for a minute, that we would move into a discussion in January about how you want to prioritize budget reductions. In preparation for that, I think one of the things that would be helpful would be to have a newer financial condition update. And part of the reason why, and I'll say it now and I'll say it again, is that when we started down this path of trying to solve the revenue problems, you've seen the slide multiple times that said, the first thing we were really trying to do was solve that critical funding gap that was kind of the Red Cross. The second one was areas at risk. And those areas at risk have been, the idea is we would solve this one and then solve the next one and solve the next one, and these would happen sort of sequentially. And that's the work we did with the revenue advisors that kind of kicked all this off. We are now, as we approach putting together that biennium, that critical funding gap and our areas at risk are smashing together in a way that I think would be, it's going to be helpful if you decide to go down the January path to understand really what we're solving for, because there's more things at risk than just the 8 million that are in that we already knew we would have to solve for in this biennium. So with that, I just look forward to your conversation and your direction.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that and this opportunity to sort of follow up on that public hearing, which felt to me some testimony a little hard to track. And so I'm going to be interested in council's reaction to some of that and maybe some explanations. So I'm looking to see if any councilor is sort of willing to weigh in with a first impression, inclination, series of questions. Mike, go for it.
Thank you, Mayor. Like my colleagues, I'm sure I've given this an awful lot of thought. And there were a couple of pieces of testimony the other night that were particularly impactful for me. But one of the things I noticed was that the number of firefighters that were there showed their obvious high level of interest in what we're doing and how it affects them and their programming and services. As a side note, in other words, they haven't had any kind of increase in years and they have needs. One of my chief concerns with this fee is that it makes it look to the community like they're paying for some extra service from the fire department. It makes it look like they're paying for needed additions to fire service. And the challenge is that they'll still come around after this point and say there are things that the fire department needs that we need to add to in order to, because we haven't. And the community is going to be in the position to say, but we gave you all that special money. And then they're going to have to say, well, but we didn't get any of it. And that's a challenge for me, to call it a fire service fee, take it out in a different place, take the general fund money back out to use elsewhere. It seems like it lacks transparency to the community for me. And I have a real problem with that structurally. And secondarily, I guess, I think in doing that, in doing something that could make some residents mistrustful, we risk the public safety fee that comes back up in another year and a half to be voted on. And if we risk that going down, then we're in a much deeper hole. And I think that it leaves us, I think it's an unwise way to proceed with the challenge that we have. I think it's wiser for us to look at this. For a number of years, I've been kind of a little bit harpy about the idea that I think we need to solve this for the long term. And by right, lots of folks say, well, but that doesn't help us in the short term. Well, fine, but it's been 3 or 4 times now. We've decided to kick the can down the road and solve for the short term. I think the answer is we need to solve for the long term here. So those are my initial feelings about it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm waiting for a counselor to raise their hand. I guess I would like a little clarification, and maybe either Chief Caven or Twyla or Sarah, a couple of those questions. So the $8 million, the $10 million that this fee would create for the fire service would all go to the fire service. There's no, I'm correct in understanding that this would be sustainable funding, and the idea is that it's long-term funding. So I don't know, Chief, if you want to weigh in on that, or Twyla sort of clarify, because I'm a little baffled by Mike's comments. And we heard that on Monday night.
I can weigh in on that, Mayor, if you don't mind. So I understand what Councilor Clark's saying, but the reality, we are solving for a gap. That's always been part of the issue. And fire services do create a chunk of the gap. Our public safety system is 60% of our general fund. So it's anytime we have a gap, a large piece of that is related to public safety. The idea with this is, yes, in the first year, you are taking $8 million worth of pressure off of the general fund, but you're putting that in a special revenue fund that is dedicated to fire. It can't be used for anything else but that. And so over time, and as that grows over time, and that tool is only a fire tool. And so it does sort of lock and secure that funding source for them. And the proposal includes $2 million of additional services as well.
Okay, Mike, I'll give you a second round, but I'm going to let others speak. Emily.
Thank you. How does this fit in with the potential merger with the Springfield that we're talking about? Does our budgets separate together have nothing to do with each other?
Chief, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It comes up in both cities whenever we're looking at these alternative revenue streams to pay for either new programs or manage existing challenges. So for us here, this money stays directly within the city of Eugene, obviously with the stabilization of a number of resources that would transfer out of the general fund into the special revenue fund. And then with the $2 million of new resource, that kind of core service area is square within the city of Eugene, where that full-time squad would be deployed. It would also be taking pressure off of 2 Springfield stations that serve the city of Eugene, just because we're not able to get there with our existing fire stations the way that we need to be. And so that long-term strategy, it continues to stabilize. But either way, in the obviously governance hasn't been picked up and carried much further than the report, but the report's recommendation was a intergovernmental entity where both cities would still be responsible to fund their proportion, their chosen service levels independently within their budgets and within their alternative revenue streams to grow those over time. And so doesn't necessarily impact today or into the future how ESF operates financially.
And it's amount of money per square foot, and the square foot won't change. So as cost of living goes up, would we have to come back to change the amount of the tax, since it's not a percentage of the, I mean, the square foot's not going to change?
Yeah, it's anticipated to be managed similar to how we manage some of our other utility funds. So those kind of decisions to adjust for CPI rate changes would be administrative, not a council decision as proposed.
Okay, thank you. I really like that it's stable funding. We're desperate. When we say, what are we going to lose? Everything is going to be affected. It will be shocking. If we get more money, all of a sudden things change. I assume we can supplement the fee so we can build another station. I mean, it's not this is the only money fire can have, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, you know, that leaves some things open as we get better. We have to get money. We have to have revenue, and we're not a rich city. There's only so much money in the city. So whether we tax soda or fire or, you know, something else we can think of, there's only so much money. And my first reaction to this was absolutely not. Fire is the first thing people think the city should cover. And that's a really big problem for me. But we have to be pragmatic. And the saving grace to me for this fee is the way it's structured. It's the least, regressive of the things we've looked at. Nobody likes new taxes. It's just, this is really hard. We have to keep fire. I am happy that it does put another 2 million, which doesn't go as far as you'd think, for more money for fire. It's important. I get it. I get the resistance to it, but I think we need to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My thoughts are along the same lines as Emily. I have people, since our public hearing and even before the public hearing that approached me about, well, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to have a unified metro fire district? Well, not a district, but we are a unified, fire service between Eugene and Springfield. And where is Springfield's buy-in on this in terms of supporting the revenue needs that we have? This is not just about the city of Eugene. This is about, when you call fire, fire is going to go to wherever they need to go, whether that's in Eugene or that's Springfield. And we still have not solved the structural problems that we have with the merger. except to have a unified leadership at the top of the fire pyramid. So, what somebody just said to me the other day is, it appears, and I know this is not necessarily the case, but it appears to the public that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Paul is not ponying up with their part of the money to support, fire operations. And maybe somebody, it's not a question, but maybe somebody can address those concerns, because I'm having a really tough time addressing those concerns with the constituents that have contacted me.
Does somebody want to reiterate again? Sarah, do you want to manage, or do you want to jump back into that? Otherwise, I'll continue.
The chief is unmuted, so I was waiting for, we're playing chicken.
All right.
Yeah. It's a question we get all the time, obviously, in this space, and even with our own staff sometimes. And the reality is, so when we're looking at the information we put out on the Eugene Fire Facts page, we took the time as we were starting this process to understand what has been Springfield's story in the last 40 years. And the fact of the matter is, Springfield's added 2 of their 5 fire stations in the last 40 years, so they've grown about 40%. When you look at in the most recent one was about 20 years ago, that is funded by a property tax levy. And so they have a secondary funding stream that added an additional fire company to their community. But in its totality, when you look at the number of firefighters or the number of fire companies per citizen, Springfield is better staffed than the city of Eugene. And their demand is lower. They don't have nearly the systematic issues. So as it stands right now, the city of Springfield fire stations are supplementing Eugene addresses. And we're one department. We operate that way. It functions better. There are intrinsic benefits to Springfield, despite the fact that some of their stations are covering Eugene territory. And that is that if all of their fire stations are available, they only have enough fire crews to respond to one single small structure fire. Whereas the reciprocal nature of where our stations are and how they deploy balances that out. And so to that end, Springfield has done their part to this point in what they're contributing on the operational basis. Where they do struggle is that space where we leverage other funds like the CSI, and we're intentional about, if we're adding some alternative program here in Eugene, we look to Springfield to supplement that in some way or participate in some way in kind, so that we're sure to say, as we grow and leverage these different tools to make investments, that it's not one-sided. It's very complex to get into the rest of how ESF is put together and the challenges that exist. But from the basis of providing fire stations or fire companies, Springfield is not taking advantage of Eugene in that space.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got quite a lineup now. Alan and then Matt.
Yeah, what this really is about is our general fund budget, and that we have a deep hole. And unless we do something about it, as Emily rightly pointed out, and Greg, that we're going to have cuts to services in the general fund. It's not a citywide problem; it's a general fund problem, citywide budget problem. So, what's the general fund? The general fund is, as Sarah pointed out, 60% police and fire, and then the rest is library, parks and recreation, and some central services, and a little bit of planning, development, and public works. But the bulk of it is police and fire. And so we have, if you harken back to some of the graphs that we had in the past presentations, the general fund, we've reduced $60 million over the last 16 budget cycles. 13 of those 16 have been budget cuts. And then if you look at the general operating budget per capita, meaning how much dollars in general fund per person in the city, we're the lowest we have been in 18 years. And then if we look at the general fund employees per thousand population, we're 20% below pre-recession levels, and again the lowest in 18 years. So it's not just the fire department problem that we've had in terms of lack of resources. It goes across the entire general fund and all of it. It's police, fire, library, parks, rec. They've all seen cuts. They've all seen no increases, and I totally get what the firefighters are saying about the funding and the lack of increases. But again, it's not just isolated to the fire, but this actually helps this situation. I think the dedicated fund and the actual increase of $2 million for other stuff will actually help that. And it's dedicated to that. So it's kind of lock boxes that portion of the general fund. So, if you don't, as Emily said, the cuts are going to be, if it's $10 million and it's across the board, it's $6 million to police and fire, and $4 million to libraries and parks and PD and central services. So, and I kind of disagree with Mike, what you said. We're not saying this is for increases in service. We're saying this is to keep us from making big cuts. I think that's really clear. It's just a different way of doing it, but it's a revenue source. And if people are misinterpreting that, they should listen a little bit more carefully, because that's not what we're saying. We're saying this is going to forestall deep cuts in the general fund.
Thank you very much. Matt, and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I'm conflicted and torn, and I've expressed that publicly and privately, but this is being proposed as a fire service fee, not as a fire stopping more cuts fee. That is the nugget as to why I suspect there's a lot of confusion and consternation. Chief Gavin at a work session several months ago mentioned that and I don't want to speak for you, Chief, but my impression was that there's a longing for a 911 over user fee, essentially assessing a fee for those who might overly abuse or use 911 to the extreme. I don't know how much revenue that would generate. I'd be interested in exploring that. It's my understanding 8 to 10% of Eugene Springfield fire calls are related to vacant homes or buildings. Why is there no component to this proposed fee structure that charges owners of vacant homes at a similar or even higher rate than the proposed fees that would be assessed to local residents?
I guess I'll jump in there. This fee emerged out of a pretty deep dive into revenues. The staff did a bunch of research, and then a group of advisors walked through it and came up with it, looking for what would make sense and could actually generate $8 to $10 million worth of revenue. And I think, to your point about vacant homes, they will still get billed, just as they get billed for stormwater, other things. They don't get billed at a higher rate. And I would be pretty doubtful that even that delta of vacant homes and whatever that might be would be a big generator of revenue. But
right,
always something to explore as we continue solving problems.
Vacancy tax, Councilor Semple alluded to a soda tax, restaurant gas tax, other fees that I'm interested in exploring. We have an ordinance banning fireworks, but to my knowledge, no enforcement of the law. And that could be a real revenue generator and change the behavior for the better. I think my point here is that to make a baseball reference, perhaps, or analogy, is that there might be an opportunity for a lot of small ball, a lot of getting on base and getting over and getting in. And it feels like swinging for the fire service fee, swinging for the fences can generate a lot of revenue. But I'm far more interested in a suite of small things to consider at this juncture. I recognize the pain points that will ripple through the municipality if we don't fill a $8 to $10 million shortfall. Forgive me, I don't know how much time I have left, Mayor, because I can't see the monitor. Can I just pause and ask?
You have 30 seconds, 29.
Okay, thanks. So I'm interested in looking at efficiencies for any and all departments where there are non-represented actions or activities that might not necessarily be in our wheelhouse or in our charge or in our best interest 24 years into the 21st century. I may need a second round, Mayor, because I'd like to elaborate.
All right, I've got you for a second round. Randy, you're up, and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. Sarah or Twyla, could somebody tell me what portion of the 60% of general fund that goes to public safety is fire and what portion is police? I always hear the numbers lumped together, but what is the actual breakdown?
Yeah, it's about 38% to police and 22% to fire.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I understand we've got problems in our general fund, and I know that we need to figure out a way to crack that nut. I also understand that the way Oregon taxation is, that I don't think the public fully understands this, and I get that by the comments we receive, is that it's not keeping pace. The revenue growth, although it feels like a lot, is not keeping pace with inflation. And that's kind of why we're in this situation. And it's not just Eugene, it's pretty much every city in Oregon. All local governments are experiencing this. I do appreciate the creativity of trying to come up with this fund. I do like the idea of having a dedicated fund for fire. It's really not going to solve any of the resource deficiencies in fire, but it is going to put us into a more stable funding mechanism. At the same time, when we first started talking about this, I tried to emphasize what I thought was important of communicating this to the public. And it's clear to me the public still doesn't really understand the fee. The understandings are all over the map. And I wish there was a better way to communicate this. I also want to say I was very intrigued by the city manager's second potential motion that could be made today to look at a work session or a workshop where council really prioritizes services. I actually think a combination of both of these could be very useful as we go forward. So we have an idea of where we all are and what we think our city should be providing. You know, what's the have to haves versus the nice to haves, and at what percentage do we break those down? But it's clear that, you know, the fire department has not kept pace with growth. In fact, I've got a question for Chief Caven. How many firefighters per 1,000 do we have for the Eugene side? I know I've seen that number before, but I can't draw it off the top of my head.
1 second here. It's about one firefighter in our total staffing level per about 1,200 citizens.
Okay, well, that's not as bad as I thought it was. It's still not ideal.
Obviously, it's, you know, closer to 1 per 3,500.
Well, one per 3,500. You know, and according to the NFPA, for communities over 50,000 population, it's about 1 to 1,000 or 1.8 to 1,000. I looked that up last night, but I wasn't sure what our local thing was. And Mayor, I'm going to need a second round. Thank you.
Okay, I gotcha. I guess I have everyone out of order. I have Jennifer next and then Lindsay. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to staff for continuing to support us on this very difficult conversation. In broad strokes, I agree with Councilor Semple and how she articulated the benefits of this method. Emily and I served on a revenue committee years back, talking about the community safety tax. We just had a second revenue committee. None of these conversations are new, and many of the sources of potential revenue, they're not new either, and they've been looked at from so many angles and with different groups of community members. It always comes down to the same conclusion. Having 6 tiny little taxes is not the solution. We need to find something that is going to be bringing us a revenue source that is not overly complex, does not cost us a ton of money to administrate, so we're actually wasting our community's funds by administrating a whole bunch of little taxes instead of just one tax. And for those reasons, I think this solution makes a lot of sense. It may not be perfect yet, and we still have time to kind of bring it in and, make some fine adjustments that might need to be made that'll make it even better. But the consequences of doing nothing are going to be large cuts across the board on all these important services that our community relies on. And I agree with Councilor Groves that there's a lot of misunderstanding still out in the community, and that's unfortunate. And we come to these meetings and we try to get the information out, and we do the very best we can. And at the end of the day, we have to make the best decisions for our community. That's how I see my job, even if they don't 100% understand what we're doing, because they're the ones that are going to deal with the consequences if we do nothing. So I'm happy to move this forward. I'm also happy to have some additional conversations around budget priorities, as long as there's still time to do this fee, should we choose to do it. We want to take a little bit of time and have that conversation. I'm willing to support that as well.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, staff. We don't want to implement this fee. Of course we don't. I agree with many of my colleagues here that we're looking at devastating cuts at this point, if we do not. And so like Jen said, I'm ready to move forward. I think we have work to do in terms of the community engagement, like others have said. And I'm supportive of looking at prioritizing our budget and looking at what would it feel like? What would the impact be of these cuts? And that might help the community understand as well the difference between, let's bring in at least an additional $2 million into our fire department, or let's cut millions of dollars from our fire department. That's going to look just so drastically different in how we are able to respond to the needs of our community. So yes, happy to continue having conversations. I don't want this process to stop for that reason, but happy to, as we're doing the budgeting, to really look further and more in depth at our priorities and really what does it look like if we had to make those cuts. And looking at all of these other little taxes and pieces that we could potentially implement. I agree with Jen. It's too piecemeal, costs too much, and they all would have a different nexus point. So if a soda tax would look at public health and how we're educating people and how that would, how we're not paying, that's not going into our general fund to pay for fire. That's going to be a specific reason, and it's probably not going to bring in as much. And there's so many complications to each single piece of that. And many of them are going to take years to implement. So we have to be very strategic about what we choose. This particular one is recommended across the state and how to address what we are looking at right now, which is our gap. and many other cities have or are already implementing a similar fee in their utilities, just like we're doing this. We are not reinventing the wheel here. We are doing something that is kind of tested as a legitimate and viable source of revenue to support our essential services. So that's where I'm landing today. Happy to continue talking, but I do want to see us put this through. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have 4 counselors wanting a second round. It's 12:36, so I'm going to ask you to, we'll set the timer for 2 minutes instead of 3 minutes, because we do need to put, I think, a motion on the table. I want to make sure there's time for that, and we have another important agenda item. So with that, Mike and then Alan first.
Thank you, Mayor. Twyla, I can see Twyla on here. Can you tell me this year, what's the general fund dollar outlay?
Oh, for this fiscal year?
Yes.
Hold on, I'll get you the fiscal year number, one moment.
Except we do a biennial budget.
I'll give you the biennial, but.
No, I just want the year. Thanks.
Okay, one moment, please. I'm going to pull something up. Just give me one moment.
The biennial is 452 million.
You're looking for the general fund, Councilor Clark?
Correct.
Yeah, so I think for the operating, if we take 188, I believe, and if we take half of that, so I'm looking to make sure. Leave 94. If you're looking just at the operating.
For round numbers, I'm going to just, let's say it's 100 million. Because it makes the conversation easier after that. So for me, my challenge is what we're spending the 40 million on. I believe there are things within that we should, as Randy mentioned, have a prioritizing, as the manager brought up, conversation about. I really appreciate the city manager and staff's creativity in trying to solve this problem and coming up with something else. My challenge, and because I am appreciative of the hard work, I don't want to use negative words. I was trying to speak of it in the first round in a kinder way. My problem with this is that it feels like a bait and switch. And the reason is because we're bringing in 10 million and spending it just on fire, but we're taking 8 million of general fund money currently paying for fire out to go and spend on other things. And that's the part where I think we risk losing community trust when we do it. And I think the consequences could be a failure of the public safety levy in another year, in a year and a half, at which case then we're losing another 23 million that isn't a part of that other calculation to pay for police and public safety. I think we should have a prioritizing conversation about how we're spending the other 40 million and look at this from the standpoint of, as Randy mentioned, the stuff we need and the stuff we'd like to do before we're instituting a new fee. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Alan.
Yeah, I take party-based budgeting to be code for let's make big giant cuts in library, recreational services and cultural services and planning and development and all those quality of life things that make Eugene a great place to live, because we're just going to fund police and fire and all
Please
those.
don't put words in my mouth, though. I appreciate that. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Counselor.
Alan, you're muted.
somebody muted me. Yeah, that's not where I want to see us go with our budget process. This process, we've been looking at this for over a year. We've had multiple city council meetings on this, and we spent months with a revenue advisory group, which had broad representation across the community, including 3 representatives from the Chamber of Commerce. And we looked at dozens of options. And one of the things that we looked at, as Councillor Ye mentioned, is that when you look at revenue options, you want to look at how efficient and the economies of scale they are. So a whole bunch of little small taxes that don't generate a lot of revenue cost a lot to do, and you don't get good bang for the buck. You end up having small amounts of money that you get from a revenue source because you have so high administrative costs to do all of them. And so that strategy doesn't really make much sense. So multiple small programs have really high administrative costs and don't give you the efficiency and economies of scale that we need to deal with a $10 million budget problem, which is pretty big. So that leads me to where I think other councilors are, which is ready to move forward with this.
Okay, thank you. I have Matt and Randy here. I don't know is Matt still?
I'm here, Mayor. I got disconnected.
Yeah.
But if you can hear me, I'm happy to add my thoughts.
There's
this isn't a choice. When folks are assessed this fee, they're assessed this fee based on their square footage. And we live in a time where we're encouraging people to scale down and have smaller homes, and the more affluent of our community members are able to do so. And the average the average resident in this community, as I understand it, will be paying around $120 a year for a service fee that wouldn't change if they weren't paying into it. The heroes of our community are still going to show up when you call 911. And so there's no choice and no extra added value. However, if you want to talk about a fee or a tax where there is a choice, there's a Ticketmaster style surcharge that could be assessed for every ticket that's sold in the municipality. And that's a big ticket item that could generate real revenue for the general fund. I'm all for finding ways to get more resources to our emergency services team, to our fire department in particular. I don't, for the reasons that have been shared, I'm cautious about the prospects in 2026 or 2026 about this going out for the CSI. And I'm cautious about a department that's so tapped and needing so many resources, not necessarily getting the resources they need for such a contentious way of raising the revenue ultimately for the general fund. I see I got 3 seconds. I think, Mayor, I'll pause there, and if there's the need for a
thank you.
Yeah, I'll stop there. If there's a third round, great.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to give you a third round, but it looks like you're going to have another whole work session, so you'll have a chance. All right, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I have more I was going to say, but in the interest of time, I think I'm going to keep it short. I agree with everything that Councilor Keating was saying. It's important that we support the people that protect us. But also, I want to say something in counter to what Alan said. I mean, this isn't just about police and fire. Those aren't the only essential services that we have, but it's just trying to prioritize. If you've got $10, where are you going to put that? And on down the line. And I think that would actually be a very healthy discussion. You know, I think there are some things that we do that maybe we should look at and reconsider. You know, we keep trying to do everything for all causes and all people, and we just don't have that luxury anymore. My concern with this fee, although I want to support our fire department, my concern with this fee is I think it's going to hurt us down the road. I think we are going to lose a lot of trust with our community. I mean, we're already hearing that. I'm certainly hearing it. I assume my colleagues are as well. And I'm concerned about risking that. You know, we need their support in a lot of areas. You know, we've got the CSI tax coming back up. And I think we need to be very careful here. We need to be very, very careful. So I'll just stop at that, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Emily?
We have to find the money somewhere. This is the least regressive way. Another advantage of this tax is we can use it to incentivize smaller homes, which is one of our goals for sustainability. And we're building more and more smaller homes. If the people who have the money build the smaller homes, well, that's great. They're using less electricity, etc. Are we going to stop it because people are going to smaller homes that we want them to do anyway? I think that we just have we don't have options. And if you put a lot of small taxes, you lose a lot of the money. I'm not so sure about the Ticketmaster charge. When we looked into that before, there would be a huge stoppage from U of O, I think. So we would have to get them on board. I think we should move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before I turn this over to Matt, I just want to make two comments. And I will say that EPD will also face cuts if this doesn't move forward, and they will face cuts in a biennium. So this will come head to head with the renewal of the community safety payroll tax. It does not strengthen EPD's capacity to pass that if the community has felt more cuts. So I sort of question that. I question that reasoning. I'm open to people clarifying that for me, but it looks to me like you're going to look at 2 years of cuts, and then you're going to go and ask for money for the end. You're probably going to have to come back and come up with another revenue stream because it's going to look bad. So I don't think that moving this later, not doing it now, is going to help you. And the other thing that I would just say to all of you as counselors is that my hope would be that whether you move forward in December or move this to January, that when it moves forward, that you are the advocates for this. And so my goal is that this happens at a time in which you feel that you can advocate for it, because you are the messengers to the public about why this is necessary and how it's going to work. And you're an important piece of that puzzle of engaging the community and helping them understand. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Councilor Keating to put a motion on the table.
Mayor, I'm in transit. If Councilor Groves could put it on the table, it's a big help.
Okay, that's great. So Randy, I'll turn to you.
Give me a second while I pivot. Is Councilor Keating talking? I can't tell.
Yeah, I apologized, Randy, for putting you on the spot like that.
Oh, no, it's okay. Well, if I'm going to put the motion on the table, I'm going to go with option 2. Move to direct the city manager to return to council on December 11th for discussion of the city's financial condition in preparation for a January council workshop regarding budgeting priorities.
Second.
All right, any further question or discussion on that? All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, all right, let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed?
I'm sorry. I don't quite understand what, I just want to clarify, is that okay, what I'm voting for?
Please do, please do.
So Sarah, if we pass this, what does that mean? What do you think that means?
That means that we would come back on December 11th, and instead of taking action on the ordinance, we'd be giving you a financial condition update. I want to pull in some of those near-term issues so you understand, just start to base a foundation so that when we come back in January to talk about potential cuts and how we prioritize those, you're better prepared for that.
And this doesn't take any of
But we
the
could still
revenue
move
options
forward.
off the table. We're just taking a sidestep to get some additional information.
Correct.
Okay, I can support that.
Okay, I have, Alan, did you need to make a comment or is that a vote?
No, it's a question actually, along the lines of what Jennifer was asking. My understanding is that we come back on the 11th and have that conversation, or is it just on the, what about the 9th and the 11th, having that conversation, doing that on the 9th and 11th and actually potentially taking action on the 11th? I thought that was where this was heading.
So
Before we go on a holiday break.
we would be able to.
And it should be Jerry.
What I'm struggling with here is for you to get into a really specific level of like, what would we actually be cutting? It's going to be pretty challenging to get you that level of specificity by December 9th. In particular, because there's a lot of internal conversations that need to happen around, hey, we're going to be putting your program up on, like, you need to know this is all out there. So we could give you, a sense of magnitude of what those are based on what we've already cut, what you already restored. So for example, you restored a fire engine in the last budget with payroll tax. You restored some Green Hill dollars with one-time funds. Like, we can bring those things back and say it'll be looking like this, but to get more specific, I think we need until January to do that.
So my interest is in potentially being able to take action before the end of the year with this sitting council and this mayor, because we've been working on it. Shifting it to a new mayor, I think, is unfair. So I'm not sure we're going to get much information other than what we already know. I mean, $10 million cuts in the general fund is, and if you just did it proportionally, it's, $6 million for police and fire and $4 million for the other parts of it. And it's going to be pretty dramatic things, and we're not going to get specifics. So, and I'm not sure that that's actually a fruitful conversation for the turmoil it would create in staff. But if we move forward with this, so is this motion preclude the ability to take action before the end of the year?
Yeah, it doesn't anticipate that you would. So if you want to do something different, have us come back sooner with more information so you can still take action. You would have to amend or do something with his motion.
Okay.
Catherine can tell you what you want.
In that case, I had a misunderstanding. I wouldn't vote for this motion then. Thank you.
All right. It looks like Matt has a question also.
Yeah. Similarly, Mayor, I'm thinking along the same lines as Councilor Zelenka in regards to timeline. And if I can just offer a bit of background. In my time before serving on city council, I was a board member at LCC. Blaine Community College went through a similar process that really eroded, not eroded trust, but it created a ripple effect through the institution that like a dark cloud of the morale was low. And I don't know if that's, not in the best interest of municipality to have such a similar conversation if it's not connected to an action. It feels like kind of kicking the can down the road. So I appreciate motion. If I had the language in front of me, I would have voted option 1. So I'm inclined to vote against this, and if I don't have the exact language, or I would vote some motion. But I want to wrap my head around obviously what impacts and cuts to municipality would be, I don't think that the interest of the health of the entire municipality to have a broad conversation.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say that was really broken up and I don't know what Matt said.
Okay. Matt explained an anecdote about LCC deferring for a longer period of time, and that it had a negative impact, that the conversation went on too long, and that his preference would be option one. So that's essentially where he landed. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just advise that my colleagues understand that the community also has the option to reverse the things we do if they don't agree with the call. I think we haven't had the conversation that we're proposing with this motion to have about priorities, and we need to, before we move forward, to institute a new tax. Otherwise, we risk the option that the community may petition to reverse our decision. The chamber has already made it clear they're not in support. And I think the further conversation about priorities is the one that's warranted first. And we really need to have it. So I encourage you to vote in favor, and let's get we still have the option. If we discover it's too ugly, then we have the option to move and put things forward. But we need that conversation first.
Yeah, Randy, you have another comment before we go?
Yes, I have a clarifying question. I thought we just voted on the motion and it passed.
We didn't quite finish. I didn't finish counting, and then I called on Jennifer. So it was an interrupted vote, and so it's not complete. People are still juggling, I think, with their opinions on that. They needed clarification on what they were voting for. And I just do want to say one thing, partly in response to Alan and the perception. I certainly personally would love to sort of bring this home in this year while I'm in office, but my larger goal is that this comes home in a way in which council feels strong and confident, and they can support it and they can represent it out in the community. And it is more important to me that you have a stronger council vote in support of this, because you feel grounded in the implications of it and the budget, and you've had a chance to talk to your constituents. So my own preference is sometimes it's take a little more time just to make sure that that foundation is solid, that communication with the public is strong. And the new mayor is eminently capable of presiding over that conversation. I'm not worried about her ability to do that at all. And if council is in a good place on their decision, then that will be a straightforward process. So, so that's a sort of note of caution in my preference. I see that the city attorney has a comment. Greg, did you have a comment you wanted to jump in here? Greg, you're still muted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. I think I agree with you, Mayor. My sense of it is that I think that this council has to send a unified message back to the community about where we are on this and what are the consequences of us not moving forward. And I think the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to have another conversation on December 9th. And I don't have a problem with kicking this to next year based on the fact that I think that we need to have more unity around what the messaging is to the community about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And, I'm just looking at the numbers in terms of, how much more is this going to add to the tax burden that already we're under with property taxes in this community. So I'm still struggling with this. And then the long-term effects of what happens when we need to go back to the voters to re-up the CSI in 2 years.
Okay, thank you. It's 1 o'clock. I'm really worried about our second item. City Attorney.
Yeah, I don't, I have a motion that kind of combines the both, but you have a motion on the table. It sounded like some people were looking for some substitution, but voting this one up and down, and then if you need an additional motion, I have that here for you.
Thank you.
Can you restate the motion, please?
Yes, please.
Yes, the currently motion on the table is move to direct the city manager to return to council on December 11th for a discussion of the city's financial condition in preparation for a January council workshop regarding budgeting priorities.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like I only, I have 5. No, wait, how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, opposed 3. So that passes 5-3. So we'll reconvene on December 11th. Thank you for a hard discussion. Appreciate all of your input, and we'll be back. Our last virtual meeting on December 11th to this topic. Okay, and with that, we need to make a transition to our second item, and I apologize for our guest presenters that we've shortened their time. So I guess manager, you want to introduce this?
Yeah, this topic is so relevant to our first conversation, and people are talking about this quite a lot. So I'm going to turn it directly over to Jeremy Cleversey and let him introduce and get started.
Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council. We've been looking forward to this work session. As you mentioned, my name is Jeremy Cleversey. I'm the Community Safety Initiative Project Manager. The payroll tax, as you know, funds services in police, fire and EMS, homeless services, youth empowerment, municipal court, and the city prosecutor's office. Staff always thought it was important that we be able to present on more than just the services that we've created with those dollars, but also the impact that's being experienced by the services that are created. So with that, Dialogues in Action is a leader in impact evaluation. When it comes to in targeted impact evaluation, and we engaged with them in the summer of, we engaged with them shortly after the payroll tax inception to create the methodology for the evaluation that you're about to see the results from. With that said, you have to wait for services to come online before you can assess them. So we re-engaged with Dialogues in Action in the summer of 2023 and to bring you this evaluation. And with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Patty and his colleague Jessamine Luis. Steve will share a little bit with you about the process of that evaluation, but mostly his focus today is going to be on what we've learned. So with that, Steve.
Thank you, Jeremy. And it's a privilege to be with all of you today. And over the past couple of years, it's been a privilege to join the teams and the departments of Eugene that comprise the payroll tax work and investment. This is an evaluation, and evaluations are usually coming in two forms: either an evaluation of what you do, or an evaluation of what results from what you do, the impact of what you do. And this particular evaluation has been focused on the latter of those options. We've been really pressing in to understand what people's experiences have been since the payroll tax has been implemented, and what their experience of safety has been, and the difference that the payroll tax has made in their lives. This, as you might imagine, gets fairly complex because some of our data gathering has been part education, reminding people what the payroll tax is all about. People's perceptions are their perceptions, and sometimes those are anecdotal or incidental, but very important to listen to as well. And so what you will see here as we go through some of the findings are the analysis and some of the high-level insights from this evaluation. I'll move pretty quickly through some of what we have learned. There are mounds of data, but I'll just bring forward some highlights right now and leave some time for your questions. Two guiding questions have been moving us forward. One, we've just been asking, what's the difference this payroll tax has made? And secondly, what seems to be contributing to that difference? And actually, this has been a second round of evaluation. The first round was a couple of years ago, a self-study that was actually designed and implemented by the teams in the departments, and just discovered a number of really helpful things that have been informing this round of evaluation. We've been focusing in on those populations that have been directly impacted by the payroll tax. So business leaders, neighborhood leaders, homeless service organizations, EMS partners, court-involved individuals, youth empowerment participants. So focusing in on their perspectives, recognizing that they have a front row seat to what's been happening, and that they're probably leading indicators of what the larger citizenry will be experiencing as the payroll tax begins to have a ripple effect throughout the community. And also, it's been not just focused on them, but leaning toward a developmental evaluation. We've been as interested in improving going forward and having this data inform the way forward as we have been just saying that it's working. The approach has been mixed methods. We've been using in-depth interviews and surveys. So a qualitative approach, because we really want to understand the depth and breadth of the narrative of people's experience. So these in-depth interviews have not been short or brief or inconsequential. They've typically been 30 to 60 minutes of in-depth conversation with people throughout the community. And then we also deployed a few surveys as well. You'll see some of this data. If we were to just look at the high-level takeaways from the evaluation, just in the big picture, the 30,000-foot level, the data are clear that alternative responses are effective, that what's been happening through each of these departments as they've been implementing the payroll tax is making a difference in their creativity, in their alternative response, and coordination, and the ways that they've been approaching improving community safety. There is the data are very clear that is having an impact. The cooperation is improving among agencies, among institutions, among nonprofit organizations, but also between the city and the citizenry as well. So we talked to a number of people that we just heard them saying we're more inclined to engage with the city on community safety as a public effort than we were before the payroll tax. Community care is growing. They're desiring to be involved more. The experience of safety, however, is mixed. It probably does not surprise you. In general, about half of those whom we sought data from said things are getting better because of what's been happening through the investment of the payroll tax. Some said it's getting a lot better, others, modestly or a little bit. And then about the other half said we're waiting still. We do not see any improvement yet. So I'll show you how that surfaces here in just a moment. And then to a great extent, people are hopeful for a greater impact from the payroll tax into the future. So you'll see some of these high-level takeaways represented in the survey data here. I care more about safety. 75% of those who provided data agreed with that. I'm more supportive of the city's efforts to improve community safety. 69% against. Those are really strong. Here you see the mixed part of this. Feel a greater sense of security and well-being in Eugene. It's close to 50-50. And I feel safer in the community. Again, we're asking, as a result of what's been happening through the investment of the payroll tax, 40% here agreed with that. So there's been some difference, 47% not yet. I'll dive in just briefly to the 5 service areas and give you a few highlights and open it up for questions or comments that you have. So for the police department, just a quite a bit of data. One quote, I think having more people come out and talk to you, that meant a lot to me. It takes someone who's listening and understanding and taking down the information so that the information becomes part of the data for creating a solution. That kind of sense of cooperation, I want to be a part of this, and I'm appreciating how EPD is interacting with me. We heard over and over and over again. So some of the big areas of positivity, people seeing improvements in safety and responsiveness in police presence and their effectiveness. People are seeing greater community engagement, people elevating their respect and appreciation for EPD. The data are so strong here. Valuing also the payroll tax investment. So look at this quote, just a representative quote. It's brought the business community back into the fold. I feel like the business community is engaged. And that was it's a solid data point representative of others. But there are also areas for improvement. The desire to see more visible progress. The quote on the side, things are the same. They've not really improved. I don't go out anymore in Eugene. So people needing to see more visible progress. People questioning about what the payroll tax dollars are going toward. There was some confusion out there amongst a number of interviewees. Ongoing concerns about the sufficiency of EPD capacity. Desire, again, business owners and neighborhood association interviewees saying we need more. We would like more presence from the police. And then desire for greater perpetrator accountability too. So again, from the survey data, those are from the interviews, from the survey data, I'm more confident that police will be there when I need them, about half. I view community safety as a cooperative effort between the police and the community more now than I used to, 62%, which is a strong response possibly there. I'm more likely to reach out to police with my safety concerns, 55%. I'm more reassured I'm heard and validated by police, 39%. So you see some positive areas and some also revealing some areas in need of attention going forward. In the efforts of time, I won't walk through this, but just so you can see for each of these areas, we have some recommendations, some things to continue that seem to be going well and are efficacious, and then areas for improvement to lean into and to develop more strategies for. So that's EPD. One of the 5 areas, Eugene Springfield Fire, the data here were quite remarkably positive. We've vastly improved our relationship. Again, we're seeking data primarily from partners of Eugene Springfield Fire. We've reduced wall time to get patients in beds faster, get medics back into the community. So some positive things. Improved communication, collaboration because of fire. Continuous and quality improvement. Things are getting better, more attention to elevating the standards of practice. Community trust and engagement has been increasing from the perspective of many. Notice the quote here. There is a hard-earned level of trust amongst the community. Some folks who might have issues or opinions or varying degrees of institutional trauma don't hesitate to access services. So an illustration of that third bullet point there. And then progress in addressing complex issues. You'll see also complex issues is a difficulty too in an area for improvement. So just the constraints of the system, the impact of the hospital closure, need for improved coordination, and greater education efforts so that others can community can hear and know and be apprised of how to engage emergency services and fire. So in the survey data, I have higher expectation of positive health outcomes if and when I need fire and or emergency services. Slightly over half said it has gotten better in the past couple years since the payroll tax has been implemented, which is a positive note there. And then with fire, as with the others, there are some things that we want to continue. We recommend continuing, and also areas for improvement here. Staffing capacity, complex issues still to press into in educational efforts. Homeless services. Homeless services, the data were primarily drawn from the partners of homeless services, so nonprofits, institutions, agencies within the community that engage with and are coordinated by the city's homeless services. data are positive here to a great extent. We've been able to respond in a way we were never able to before. Again, as a result of this, when we see a need, we can act on it now. That was never the case before. So again, some high level positive areas of impact: collaboration between organizations, service capacity extensions, the application of evidence-based practices. So there's the communication of what evidence-based practices are all about, and then an up-leveling of institutions and organizations and agencies to be able to apply those, enhance sustainability and greater community knowledge of services as well. And of course, areas for improvement. So administrative processes, desire for greater flexibility, improved coordination between city and county and service providers, and then a need for improved data collection utilization as well. Interestingly, the survey data here is one of the strongest responses. I'm more aware of programs to meet the basic needs of people experiencing homelessness. 70% said this has made a difference, the payroll tax. I know more about ways to get involved when I encounter issues related to homelessness. Over half would say yes to that. Public safe areas are safer. It's mixed. They're 50-50, and I'm more confident in the direction the city is moving to support people experiencing homelessness, 45%. So again, that is mixed. So some areas to continue with, because some real positive things, also some areas to lean into and to improve. And there are more specific recommendations in each of these as well. Let me just briefly mention the last two areas, or the remaining two areas of municipal court and then youth services as well. Some positives here. I think the justice system is good. I'm coming from a place where I did not have respect about the justice system, to a place where I have a high regard for the justice system. So the data drawn from court-involved individuals primarily. And some real positive things: increased trust and respect, personal growth, restoration of faith in the community, increased civic engagement. The court process, the quote here is, treating me like I'm a human being. There's not very many people that treat me like a human being. We heard that over and over and over again. And then, because of the complexity of the human experience, the need for more housing and services, more mental health and substance abuse resources, more personalized and flexible approaches as well. So some things to continue here and some things to work on. In the interest of time, won't read those. And the last area, I think everyone in youth empowerment programs, this is the outreach to youth, I think everyone has a place in the community. I feel like a lot of teens don't realize that. I feel like making an impact in the community is going to help more people than you think it will. Resolve participant. So some areas of impact here: improved life skills, expanded support system for these young people and their families, develop leadership skills, accessing community assets, giving back to the community. And look at this survey data from youth. I'm better connected to positive and supportive adults. 95%, I feel more control of my life. 83%, I'm more resilient. 79% of interest as a result of participating in the program. In which of the following areas do you know how to access help? Peer support, conflict resolution, very high. When you get down to disability, homelessness, it reveals areas for possible growth going forward. So some areas of improvement here. Practical experience, next steps past these years, addressing some issues of personal life and health. So some things to continue, some things to improve. If we back up to the 30,000 foot level, that's just some highlights. There's so much more. We have mounds of data here that the teams have been working through. But some high level next steps to use the feedback to improve program impact. So we want to take the recommendations, put them into practice. And then to expand engagement of the evaluation, because this is evaluation on focused. So we anticipate over the next couple of years expanding that to increase the participation and data collection, to track some longitudinal trends, particularly with some business owners, neighborhood association leaders, to track them over time and see how they're watching the trends. And then there's so much positive in the midst of all of this, that we anticipate being able to communicate that progress. And with that, I'll close the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for working your way through that. And I'm eager to have a chance to sort of dive back into your slides a little bit more. So that was, encouraging. I think a lot of things we probably know in terms of staffing is an issue, right? Across the board. And of course, I'm always inspired by any work that involves youth and helping youth feel that they're connected and connecting to adults who are paying attention. So that was a particularly nice note to end on, good news, and that the homeless services and Unicourt both really experiencing good changes. The people who are coming through those programs feeling stronger, and the people certainly in the homeless services using our services, finding that it's responsive and helpful. So good data to work on. I really appreciate that presentation, and I'm opening the floor for counselors. Any other counselors that want to offer some feedback or ask some questions? We actually have time. Wow. Emily.
Feel I have to say something, having been a relentless advocate for the beginning of this funding. I think one of the problems is that, yes, things have gotten better. We have some more resources, but because of the challenges, one of the things this has really helped is keeping it from getting a lot worse. And as much as we see struggles today, it could have really exploded more. I hope that we will continue to, as a city, support this tax. We all hate taxes, and right now people are unhappy and angry. But we still need more police. We still need to support fire. We still need resources for the homeless. We need a lot of everything. But this is helping, even if you don't see miraculous changes. So I'm happy that we did this, that we got it. I did my happy dance. And I congratulate all of us in doing this, even though it was unpopular at first. So good work to staff, to council, to the community, and keep the faith. We are trying to make it better and better. The challenges are huge. So let's stick with this. We need to be safe. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Emily, anybody else want to chime in this moment? Councilor Clark, Mike, go for it.
Because it's a tiny bit off of the presentation, maybe Jeremy can answer this question for me. In very simple terms, the community safety payroll tax was designed to add, and perhaps you'll correct my number of new officer positions. I remember that being 30. Was it 30 or 40? I can't remember exactly.
The number that it was originally hoped to?
Correct.
That
sworn officer
was higher. It was upwards of 50.
And we have added how many?
Well, we've added 24 of the police officers, but you also have 19 community service officers that were alternative response, so that we could train and get them into the field faster, given our difficulty with hiring. So it was a more economical and faster way to meet.
Get help on the street. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the 24 a net number? Or are they filled positions, or have we lost officers in positions sufficient that the 193 sworn is different today, higher or lower?
So, you've got two different buckets, right? So you've got the general fund and you've got the payroll tax funded officers. And so our positions at this point are filled, but as far as the net loss, net gain, at this point in time, how many are currently in training? How many are in the field? How many are there? There's some variance there. So I couldn't say that they're all full at this time. I can tell you that the payroll tax positions are full.
And again, I hate to land those questions on you. I think that's probably, my questions in this regard are probably larger questions for the chief, I suspect, in total administration of the department, but I appreciate your taking a shot at that for me. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments? I do think that a line of questioning from Mike, it really underlines what Emily was saying, which is that at least the capacity through the payroll tax to hire has in some ways balanced out the struggles that we've and the potential to have community safety officers has really helped balance out the shortage of personnel, knowing this. And I'm understanding we're making great progress in staffing at all levels. So it's an encouraging turn. And this has really stabilized us. I mean, through a pandemic, right? This was instituted and then we had a pandemic and all of the complexity that and challenges that presented us with. So I see Emily with another and the manager with a comment.
I just want to remind people that something we did get is the street safety team. And they have been very successful in working against one of our biggest problems, which are drugs, especially fentanyl, and the illegal cash and weapons that goes along with that, as well as other problems on the streets. It's a really important team. Don't always see the results, but we try to put them out for publication. So just remember that.
Thank you. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to mention, this is where this conversation comes together. When I give you the financial update in December, to Councilor Clark's point, one of our budget strategies that we implemented during this biennium to minimize the impact on police patrol and policing was to assume a vacancy rate, because they had such a large vacancy rate so we're pressing right up against that vacancy rate now. And that's about $1 million a year that we will need to address in some way or literally reduce those vacancies in order to keep going. So we're not full. Chief's trying really hard. I've pushed him hard. Don't let the vacancy rate savings keep you. You keep hiring as fast as you can. And when we hit that point, we will need to make some different decisions, and we can talk about that more in December.
That's helpful. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I appreciate that, Sarah, and the point is well taken. The only thing I would comment on a larger scale in combination of our previous conversation is to say that while these results seem that the community is hopeful and have seen many of the non-officer on the street related things that the payroll tax does produce good results, the overall feeling of safety seems a mixed bag. Let's be generous here at a 50-50 kind of response. Typically, when you go out with a bond or a vote for a levy of some nature, most polling experts will tell you that you want a 60% favorable before you even go out for the thing in the first place. So I would, I guess, offer that for my colleagues to factor in that this vote is coming in another year or so here, like it or not. And I would suggest that the more we could do to maintain this funding, the better off we will be as a community. I think that if we do things that endanger that, we put ourselves in a much greater risk. So thank you.
Okay, Randy, one final comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was actually going to try and go a work session without saying anything because I think you guys covered it very well. But the one piece, just and the chief knows this. I've talked with him. The one thing I hear still continually are the property crimes and the crimes, the economic pieces that are really hurting people, and some of the behavioral problems. I'm hoping that as CSI has come into full swing, that we'll start seeing, and as staffing gets caught up, that we'll start seeing some inroads in addressing some of these issues as well. I think we've done some things very well, but at the same time, this is a part of our protecting our community that we need to find ways to be more creative and be more effective, period. So just something to take back and think about. But I mean, we have businesses and residents are losing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to property crimes. And it just is ongoing and it needs to stop. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you again for being able to condense your presentation into the time we left you. I appreciate that. Look forward to more. And with that, thank you, counselors, for your questions and comments. And we are adjourned.